Hello and welcome. My name is Aaron and this is the Thrive Life podcast, where I'm going to be sitting down and chatting with some pretty special people that have inspired me along my health journey. I hope these discussions can inform and inspire you along your journey, so please listen with an open heart and an open mind and enjoy the show. Thanks for tuning in. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Thrive Life podcast. I am so excited for the guest that we got on this morning. I don't know too much about this topic, that's why I'm so excited just to sit back and soak up all this beautiful and ancient information. We're going to be touching all things biogeometry and subtle energies. And if that sounds a bit like some spooky wah-wah stuff to you, this is the episode for you, because we're going to be marrying science and spirituality together, which is the way it's meant to be. They're a whole. There's no division there, and it's actually easier to understand the spiritual through a science lens, or it's actually easier to understand the science through a spiritual lens. For anyone that's been doing, Rudolf Steiner or biodynamics or breathwork, you will understand that these two things go hand in hand. There is not a separation there. I am sitting across from a beautiful mama, a medicine woman, a light worker, an earth warrior, and a specialist in biogeometry. I'm sitting across from Kassandra, is it Scardino? Scardino, yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. How are you going this morning?
Yeah, good. You got me in a good state. I've had some sleep.
Nice. Yeah. I remember you mentioned you were going to head to the farmers markets. Did you end up getting there this morning?
Yeah, I was there early morning.
Beautiful. Yeah. How was that?
Yeah, good. We got to get all our fresh produce, which is all part of keeping the health.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. It's good to vote with your dollar, right?
100%.
Yeah. Not going to the supermarkets. Well, Cass, I like to start the podcast off with this question, and that is, what's keeping you thriving and what is thriving in your life today?
Good question. Thank you for having me. It's nice to be back in this space. I love sharing my message, and for me, what's keeping me thriving, and that's something that I guess at this point in time is really getting back in touch with community roots and grassroots change. I'm a big catalyst for solution-based, finding ways to change the matrix, really get people out of the matrix. And that's been my path, I think, from my early 30s, but in motherhood and coming back into my work, because I've just had a little bit of a break since I had my two kids, I've really felt that huge calling to be that word, be that stand. And so right now I'm working on a couple of things, even biogeometry based. So yeah. That's what's keeping me thriving. And what was the second part?
And what is thriving in your life today?
What is thriving in my life today? At the moment, I would say it's just my personal work that I've been doing. I've been doing a lot of testing with biogeometry on sacred ancestor masters. So I do work with the gods and goddesses, or in biogeometry, they're not actual physical beings, they're actually essences of nature. And I've been doing some work with that at the moment. I'm working with Archangel Metatron, Mother Mary, Archangel Michael, the goddess Nut, goddess Isis, and unicorns.
Wow. So for someone that's listening that doesn't have the grasp, doesn't have this in their life, this is going to sound like a bunch of crazy wah-wah stuff, right?
It's pretty, yeah.
So before we get into all that sort of stuff, what's your philosophy on life?
Philosophy on life?
Deep question.
That is a very big question. I like to really surrender to the process of letting life guide, and with the intention of where I'm putting myself and then let the universe kind of like take that and bring it back to me in a place where I can really sense what's serving me and what's not serving me. I really truly believe that we are spiritual beings having a physical experience. So we're multi-dimensional. We're not really just like a physical human. And so we're really stunting ourselves when we're like just thinking from a 3D perspective, because there's so much more out there. I feel like for me at the moment, it's been 3D because I've had to live in this physical world with my kids and providing. So I have a lot of respect for people, you know, doing that and having that grind. But I feel like where I really set myself apart is that I'm consciously connecting into those higher forces to keep me in a space where I know that that's actually available to me when I'm getting stuck or, you know, needing that extra energy, because it's so there. People just have no idea.
That's why it's like Luke Skywalker, right?
Yeah.
Like his name, Skywalker, it's because he's going in and out from the physical realm to these other realms, right? So let's talk a little bit about what life was like for you growing up. Were you always sort of have a gnosis for mysticism and like the esoteric of life? Or did that sort of come later on in life? Was there a catalyst moment that brought you back to the true essence of what it is to be a human being? So dive us back into what created the person that I'm sitting across from.
Yeah, it's funny. If you met me, maybe even not maybe 20 years ago, like I just turned 40, so 20 years ago, you know, in my 20s, I was a very different person because I went through my awakening, and that was a huge catalyst of where I am now. But as a child, I was a uh, very sensitive empath. And I think nowadays people consider themselves empaths, and it can be like this real curse because it's like they feel everything, and that was me. But I guess that was like my journey of understanding that that was a spiritual gift. And as a child, I dealt with a lot of depression. But it was funny when my mother was probably when I was probably around 12, maybe a little bit younger, she found this spiritual church called Vegan. That like Vega is like a planet. And so there was this Vega spiritual church that she joined. And so I was super fascinated, and she let me come with her, and I would basically learn psychometry, Reiki, all this stuff. And I just like naturally had a knack for it. And I just remember one day we went to one of the spiritual fairs that you hear about in community halls and stuff. And one of the women there, she saw me and she said, "I have this message for you." And I was like, okay. And literally, this is like this, you know, 12-year-old kid going and having this woman do a full-blown channeling of Mother Mary. And I'm like talking proper mediumship where she changed her whole face.
Wow.
And this being Mother Mary came through and said to me, "I know you've been having a really hard time and suffering on this planet." And, you know, at that stage, I'd been dealing with full-blown depression through my childhood because of my sensitivities. And she said, "You know, you're a very special person. You might not understand this now, but you will." And I just remember that moment of being like completely held and just going, okay, if this is like my message to keep going, then I just felt like I had that feeling of like, I know that there is something more to life than just this, and I'm ready for it. So those were like, that was probably my big, you know, one of my big awarenesses of being a spiritual being. And then as the years progressed, you know, I've had, you know, I've seen God through, you know, staring at a candle when I was like a younger child as well, and didn't realize that that was a technique that you can do later on in life, and actually connected into God. God was speaking to me. You know, I had people when I was out say to me, "Do you know who you are?" And these were like spiritual people coming up to me going, "Do you know who you are?" And like going, "No." And just like things like that.
Yeah.
Because I think the thing that people might struggle with when they're dealing with their spirituality is that they can be told that they're this super powerful person, but it means nothing until you actually really go into that space. And it's not from this like, oh, I'm so special because I'm powerful. It's actually like going, I understand that this is available to me, and
Yeah.
I can do some really cool stuff now with my life. And that's what's happened, I guess.
And you got to like clear away some of the gunk that you've carried throughout your life so you can access the, it's almost like cleaning out your vessel, right?
100%.
So like your traumas, the tensions that's in your body.
Yes.
But not only that, then like you said, eating well, so then your body's like healthy, so you can be sort of more like an antenna to bring in that consciousness, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
All of it matters.
yeah. So let's talk a little bit about biogeometry, and let's just walk through a little bit of an introduction. I was watching. So you studied at the Vesica Institute, which was, for those listening, that was founded by Dr. Robert
Gilbert.
Gilbert. Yeah, I watched a few of his videos last night, and Dr. Robert Gilbert studied under Dr. Ibrahim Kareem, who was the founder of biogeometry out of Egypt, and super interesting stuff because what I realized in the video last night that I was watching, that they do dowsing, right? And so I've had to play around on the dowsing rods at home, just trying to find some water pipes that my dad had sunken. So when we're digging, we're not going to hit the water pipe. So is that sort of like the same technology, the same sort of thing when trying to find these energy lines, or what would you call them?
So dowsing uses yourself as the conductor for bringing the energy through, because without your body, you can't actually activate the vitality that creates the movement. Because if you had a plastic robot, say, going around, there's no life force. We carry life force through, similar to like the fascia, but it's like this casing or netting that like is in our body that absorbs the plasmatic state that actually creates the life force that it lightens our body up. And so that's what the rods are picking up when we're looking for something, but it's the intention of what it is that we're looking for that creates the movement.
Right.
And so depending on what you're looking for, like some people use it to find opals or to find water, their intention is, I'm looking for opals, I'm looking for truffles, I'm looking for water. And so then when that happens, that's what activates that state. Now, someone might say, well, I've done it and I couldn't find it. And I would say, well, that's because you're not still enough.
It's funny you say that, because me and my dad can find the water pipes.
Yeah.
But mum, and she's quite I don't want to say stressed, but there's a lot of energy moving around. Like you said, that stillness. So I don't think she can quiet herself enough to allow that process to come through.
Yeah. So that's kind of like how dowsing rods, even pendulums and biogeometry, I say, would have aspects that we're touched upon with all of that, but it's different in the way that those tools are specific to things that they pick up in that particular tool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, let's talk a little bit about, the sacred power spots, the reason why churches and mosques and temples are built where they are. Let's start there, and then we can sort of branch off a little bit deeper. Let's just keep peeling back these layers.
Yeah, so like the original Masons, so a lot of the Masons we know now in like Masonic temples, they've lost that ancient technology. It's technology because it wasn't just like a church-based activity. This was actually what, in tribes, like villages and people that were living in, the original, what would you call it, like towns, they would have these masons that would be in charge of organizing where the spiritual spots would be laid first. And then this would be kind of like how they would govern all of the energy moving out to the centers of the town or specific areas. And so the original Masons had this technology of being able to use tools to pick up power spots. And so power spots could be naturally found by indigenous cultures. And I'm going to tell you a really cool thing that I found out through biogeometry. When you go into, say, like Aboriginal sites and there's a cave, and you see a cave painting of like a particular animal, and what the archaeologists thought was, oh, they were talking about the specific animals in that area by putting this cave painting of say antelope, for example, right? Or whatever it was in that area. But then they saw that there was all of these chips in the actual cave. Now, the reason why that there was all these chips in the caves is because what the hunters of that area were doing were getting their spears or their daggers or whatever, and stabbing the actual animal picture in the cave. Now, you might be going like, why the hell were they doing that, right? So this is talking about the shape information of the cave. The cave is a toroidal, or not a toroidal, sorry, it's a spiral of the big opening going into a center where it's the back of the cave, and that actual energy pool of like going in is condensing, right? It starts from a big surface area, gets smaller, and goes into the smallest area, which is like that small area at the end. And what that does is it creates a push of energy that's natural to the cave formation. And so what these people understood as hunters is that push of energy was actually creating an intention of piercing. And so they would draw the animal, which was the shape information of that particular animal, and then getting the spears and stabbing it to weaken its auric field. So when they went hunting, the animal was already in a depleted state, so they would have the upper hand. And so what the archaeologists didn't understand was that they were already using forces of nature that they understood in order for them to hunt and gather. And so then these hunters and gatherers would go off and they were finding their antelope. And then all of a sudden they would go and find this antelope, start hunting it. And then back in those days, they had the ability to see energy like we don't, because we've become lazy, right? And so they were going off hunting this antelope. And then all of a sudden they notice that when the antelope goes over a specific area, the energy of the animal goes up. And then they go, oh, this is actually better than actually getting the antelope, because what they've found is a spot on the earth that is a power spot. And that power spot has the ability to have high energy frequencies for healing that are beneficial. And so if there was water, the watering hole would have beneficial energy. If there was food in that area, the food would be beneficial. But what they've actually tapped into is a spot that they could connect into that's of higher frequency, and that's a power spot. And so the Masonics understood these power spots to be very powerful, and that's why, we see temples or Stonehenge or, some hieroglyphs and all that on these particular power spots, because they hold a vibration that creates a intention of activating these higher energies. And so that's why they would build these temples on top of it, because they want to communicate with the higher beings, because we're on a lower vibration in the physical and these beings are in a higher dimension. It's not easy for us to go up, and it's not easy for them to go down. So they need that power spot in order for them to anchor something. And for some of us, it could be, a cross, or it could be a statue, or it could be a shape of a pyramid. And all of these things we don't understand because we've lost that awareness. But these shapes have specific energetics, right? Just like the cave has a special energetics that creates a way for these higher beings to come down and for us to connect up. So back in the days... So
you're like meeting in the middle, sort of.
Yeah, we're basically bringing these beings down into a physical plane so we can communicate. Because back in the days when there was kings and queens and noblemen, the people that were in charge weren't the kings and queens, it was the priests and the priestesses, or the ones that were the noble people. Well, not the noble people were underneath. It was the people that were connecting into spirit, because they were the ones that the kings and queens were going, there's a problem, what do we do? And then the priests and priestesses would go to these areas of the power spots and connect into the beings and go, this is the problem, what do we do? And then they would come back speaking to these beings. They're not just, in our imagination, they're actual beings that have the ability to work with specific things that we can tap into and give guidance. And that's when they would do crops and harvest, and that's how they understood cultures, and they built all of these, now Easter or whatever it is that we do. They based it on these teachings that we understood from these higher dimensions that were teaching us through these temples or power spots.
So with the Aboriginal Australians, with them tracking through song lines, is that sort of like a similar thing, but they're using their body as instead of having like a pendulum or some sort of technology like the Egyptians would have, they're literally just using their body as the antenna. Is that sort of a similar thing, or is that a little bit different?
It's exactly the same thing, because we don't need to use a pendulum. We have that ability. It's just that the indigenous cultures understood how to talk to the rocks or the trees. So one of the things as I've developed as a spiritual person is that you can, using intention, track what it is you're looking for. So the indigenous trackers, they wouldn't be necessarily looking just for footprints. They would be tracking the energy of whatever it was that they were looking for, and communing with the rocks and the trees, because they all have spirits too, right?
Yeah.
And the higher beings can communicate through these forces of nature. And so they could understand this and start to work with them to find what it is that they're looking for. And I've done it for crystals myself, but it's totally something that we've lost in time.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Like, let's talk a little bit about, sort of touched a little bit on sacred power spots. Let's talk a bit about the Egyptian temple science. Yeah.
Those are power spots.
Yeah.
Those are literally power spots.
Same thing, different word.
So it's not different. It's the same in the sense that they're big power spots that they put the actual tombs on top of, and then the way that they would have all the different compartments, because when you look in pyramids, there were areas that were compartmentalized, and because archaeologists didn't understand what they were either, they would say, oh, this is like a ceremonial space. But what they didn't realize is that power spots are not just only on the earth, they also go up. So this is going into the technology of Tesla, right? Yeah. Tesla was understanding that there were power spots, not just on the ground, but up above, and that when you could tap into those power spots, you could create energy. And so a lot of these pyramids were used for bringing energy into their cities.
Conducting, yeah.
Exactly. And so all of these temples have not been understood because they didn't understand that these principles of nature were what they were using. And so there were specific areas that were tombs, and those tombs were connected into specific things, but then there was also areas in the pyramids that were conducting energy or used for specific things that were relative to the energy that they created.
It's fascinating. Like, it's such a topic that pulls me in, and I just have to keep repeating the information to sort of soak it up a little bit more.
Yeah.
So when you get these like temples, and you mentioned Tesla technology, it's like, but these bringing that electronics out of the air, like, because there's a lot of stuff on the internet at the moment. I don't know really what to believe or what to put my focus on and attention onto. So how would they actually harness the energy? Like, because I know the pyramids have got the gold cap on the top as well.
Yes.
And gold's a really good conductor for energy.
Yes.
So would that draw energy from the sun or these power spots that you're talking about?
Both. So they weren't really using just one, and that's the thing. When you understand how to work with these energies, you try to overlap them as much as possible.
Yeah.
So they're using the shape information of the pyramid, they're using the conductor of the gold, they're using the power spots not just on the floor but within the actual temple as well, in the areas that were grabbing that energy. Then they might be using tunnels to because wherever the energy is condensed, they would then amplify it, and then there would be tunnels that would be leading from that specific area to the places that they wanted to conduct that energy.
Yeah.
And then those would connect into more power energy spots that would then spread it out.
Right.
So it's just kind of like electronics, right? Like an electrician will connect it from the main power point and then feed it through.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of hard unless you understand the shapes and the way that they conduct and how you put them together, and then how they actually create that free energy, I guess.
Yeah.
But I mean, one of the other things that I've gotten into is plasma nanotechnology, and that's new, created by the Kesh Foundation, and that is also connected to biogeometry because it holds the centering vibration, which is basically what biogeometry is based upon. And the centering vibration...
Is that another word, 0 point technology? Is that the same thing? Or
So 0 point technologies is... Well, to be honest, I'm not 100% sure about that, but 0 point technology in my mind is probably connecting into potentially the centering vibration.
Yeah.
But don't quote me on that. But the centering vibration is actually creation energy. It's the energy that connects into life of God.
Yeah.
Like the energy of God. But we have to understand God isn't just one essence. That's why if you go to the Indian cultures, they've got like 1,000 deities, because there's 1,000 essences of the creation energy, because creation is in like so much, right? But once you connect into the creation energy, you're connecting into pure source light frequency, the connection to creation energy, right? And that's that energy that vitalizes it. It creates life force, right?
So that's like the prana, the chi.
Yeah, but different.
Okay.
Like prana and chi is energy,
Yep.
but centering vibration is connection to God.
Yeah.
Or
Godhead.
whatever God is for you. Could be like...
So could it be also, you've got the Luciferian and Aramanic forces, and then centered you've got the Christ consciousness?
So there's no polarity
Okay.
in the centering vibration.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean.
Oneness.
The center is the
Yes.
Christ consciousness.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, okay.
And I mean, that's the thing, like, there's so many different religions that have a word for it, but I think when I look at it, it's creation energy.
Yeah.
So creation is God, right? Because nothing can trump God.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't like to use God because people have religious connotations to it. But plasma connects into this centering vibration. And so what plasma does is it uses... And I'm talking about plasma has the ability to create hovercraft technology. So like technology where we can start to catapult off the ground without using engines, because it's working with the propulsion of magnets that repel each other. And so when you have two positive magnets, they propel each other.
Yeah.
And so what they've done is they've found a way to pull the energy of that and then create this plasmatic nanotechnology that has the ability to create that in a physical form.
Yeah.
And so this technology is completely new, but it's like the ability for us to now, go into space.
It's crazy because, when you talk of things like that, you're talking about like levitation.
I'm talking about levitation, for real deal.
Moving objects.
Exactly.
So like when you look at the pyramids, no one's been able to explain how these have been built from our perspective, as if, we're using our machinery.
Yes.
But when you tap into these sort of technologies,
exactly.
So Graham Hancock sort of talks a little bit on it, but he doesn't really go too deep on it.
Yes.
But yeah, talking about moving these giant stones, cutting these giant stones with some sort of vibrational or harmonic technology, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. That's exactly what I'm talking about. So that's crazy. Kind of like what is capable and what we're bringing back into humanity. And biogeometry has all of that there. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cool. Just before, I want to touch a little bit on Dr. Ibrahim Kareem and why this technology has now come out of Egypt into the modern world. But before we do that, I just want to talk a little bit about the Stalking the Wild Pendulum, this book I've got here.
Yeah.
Because in this book they mention, so you were talking about the cave, how it's got the pulling energy and it's like a spiral. They explain, Itzhak Bentov explains in this book sort of the coil or the frequency energy that is inside a building or something, right? So if you're inside a concrete building, right, it feels dense in there.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like the air in there is just, everything's more compressed. You can feel the weight of the building, even though it's still air in there. You can still feel the heaviness.
Yeah.
Whereas, so if you were inside a house with a tin roof, it's very airy, it's very open. And what he explains in this book is, so if you, in this building with concrete, the coil is like suppressed. So it's like, it's almost like a suspension that's pushed down. But if you're in, say, like an iron roof, a tin roof, the coil's more open and stretched out. Does that sort of resonate with what the conversation that we've been flowing with?
So it's the information that you're picking up in those fabrications that is what's creating the energetics of those buildings.
Yeah, okay.
So when I say information, metal has a different information to say cement, to say wood. And so all of that information, we're not aware of it, but it's creating a density. And so a square shape is a lot more dense, say, than a circle shape. Why? Because square in its natural form is what we build things like bricks with, right? And a brick is a shape information for stability. It has a very grounded shape information. And so if you're living in a square building or a rectangle building, the information of that is a lot more dense than, say, if you're living in a hut or a teepee or a adobe building, because the information of the circle is actually connection into creation vibration, because the centering vibration is the oneness, which is the circle.
Wow.
Right?
My mind just keeps getting blown as you talk. So, yeah, let's talk a little bit about Dr. Ibrahim Kareem. I was, with that video I was watching last night, Robert was talking about the study in the university in Cairo, I can't remember what it was called, about the 300 people that had hepatitis C.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that? And then we can dive into why Dr. Ibrahim Kareem's bringing this technology and trying to spread it out into the world.
Yeah, look, that's an amazing story. Like, he talks about how, I don't know if you heard the whole story, but just in a recap, because it's probably out there quite a bit, he was asked by the Egyptian, I think it was like the Medical Egyptian Association, to do a study on hepatitis along with other pharmaceuticals. And what Dr. Ibrahim said, because he knew that it was quite a corrupt industry, he said, I don't want to see these patients physically, because he didn't want his work to be perceived as corrupt, like he's paid them off or done something, whatever, right? Yeah. He said, I will work with these people, but I don't want to see them. I just want their photos. And so what he did was he actually had like the highest rate of clearing of hepatitis. I can't remember what the percentage was.
90% it was.
Yeah, see, it was just like phenomenal. It blew everyone out of the water. And he actually said he would have had almost 100% success rate if he had the ability to change the vibration of the people's homes. Whoa. Because what we don't understand, and this is kind of like touching into the biology of belief, Dr. Bruce Lipton, who talks about how we have these receptors that pick up information based on our environment, so how we live, based on who we spend time with, so our culture, our family, the people we hang out with, what we absorb in our information that we're perceiving through our phones, our technology, and then how we interact with everything, so what we put into our body, even the creams and things, like all of that is what's actually creating us. Mm-hmm. And so what Dr. Ibrahim was able to do was to change the vibration of these people through the technology he has to manipulate their information of their body. But he said that the only reason he didn't have 100% success rate was because whatever that 10% had negative energy was probably stuff that he needed to manipulate in their environment in order for their body to actually absorb all of those changes properly.
Yeah.
So wow. This is when we're talking about negative ley lines, and that's what a lot of, it's an interesting topic, but cancers can actually be created by negative lines in your bedroom.
Yeah.
So wow. That's like stuff that's possible.
Crazy.
Yeah.
So I learned who Dr. Ibrahim Kareem was through Paul Chek. Mm-hmm. And he told this story, I'm not sure if you've probably heard it, about how there was these cows in Switzerland that were having trouble with infertility. Have you heard him speak about that?
I haven't, no.
Yeah, this is really cool. So I'll link to this in the show notes, the Paul Check podcast. But there were these cows, these cattle that were having trouble giving birth, stillbirth, because of these electricity towers that were going up, and these companies actually contacted Dr. Ibrahim Kareem to come and put his devices on these towers, and they said, "Oh, what do you think we should do? How can we resolve this?" And Ibrahim said, "We'll get rid of the towers." And they're like, "Come on, we can't do that. There's too much money in this. What technology have you got? Can you help us?" So all he did was went and put these little biosignatures, is that what you'll call them? Biosignature devices on the towers, and instantly these cattle started having, life, like you said, life force energy birth again. You know, there was no infertility rates anymore. And that is just mind-blowing. I'd just like to touch that we're not making any medical claims, but there's these studies out there who are done with Ibrahim Kareem, with medical science, and the information is out there from those medical scientists if you want to go and have a look at that sort of stuff. But
yeah, it's crazy because like he says we can assimilate with technology. The problem is that we are not catching up with all of the changes of technology fast enough. Like you can see all the 5G towers going up, and like it's crazy what these effects are because it's subtle, right? We don't look at our body as a subtle being, we look at it as a physical being. And so a lot of the time medicine is working with effects. So it's saying, oh, you've burnt yourself, so we're going to cool the burn because that's the opposite of hot, correct? Whereas when we're working with Ibrahim Kareem's technology, it doesn't use polarity. It goes straight to the center, and there's nothing that can trump the center because the center is harmony. It is unity. It is oneness. And so these towers are creating chaos in the harmonics of the cows. And that chaos is causing them to not be able to reproduce. And can you imagine what it's doing to our physical bodies as humans?
And you only have to look at the statistics in humans at the moment and see the fertility rate is dropping at an alarming rate.
Exactly. And so when I've done clearings in places where there's been issues with fertility and they're living right across the road from a tower, the first thing I say is that's your biggest problem, right? Because that's going to create disruption. And the problem is it's such a subtle disruption. It might start off with nausea, headaches, itchy sinuses, things like that. But then the longevity of staying in that disruption is going to create what we call disease in our body, right? And so these cows were a perfect example. They were unable to produce. They might have even had tumors and all these things, right? And that's like a lot of the studies that Ibrahim's done is like these animals, the birds, they start dying, the insects start dying because of all of this disruption. But when we change it, and it's not getting rid of the 5G emission, right? That still exists. But what we're doing is we're harmonizing it. We're bringing it into an equilibrium so that way it's mimicking the higher harmonics of nature.
Wow. Yeah, it's incredible. Talking on Paul Check and what you were just saying about the build-up of the stress that you're receiving from these towers or what electronic devices, whatever it may be, is, Paul Check's in his book, How to Eat, Move and Be Healthy, he mentions the 6 types of stress. So you've got your nutritional, chemical, mental, physical, thermal, and then electromagnetic. And going into electromagnetics, there's there's good stress from that, and then there's bad stress from that, just as there is, because there's polarity. But then what you're talking about, harmonizing that stress, becoming into finding the center way, the center point, the middle way, you don't get that build up. Like you were saying, you might get fatigued at first, tired, lethargic, some sort of symptom, and that's the pain teacher telling you, hey, there's something not right in our environment, and it needs to be addressed. So if you can listen to that, that pain teacher, that your body communicating with you, then you can correct it so then it doesn't come build up and eventually becomes disease or death, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, a lot of people just take a Panadol and
And
then just think it's fine.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Try hide it, hide the symptoms.
Yes. Yeah.
So, what type of work do you do with this technology, with clients, with the land? Yeah, let's hear it
Yeah. Look.
because I'm sure it's deep.
Well, at the minute, I do actually help people's like, for example, one of the things that I would say people need to clear in their home as a basis is any type of smart meter, any power boards, because a lot of the time our power boards are usually on the side of the house, and that side of the house might be on the other side your bedroom. Right? And so power boards can have a lot of condensed negative energy, and that's sending it straight through into your brain if you're sleeping right in that area, right?
And the wall is usually made of drywall, which has minerals in it, and those minerals are conductors as well. So it's like you've literally got this huge antenna right behind your bed.
Yeah, so like smart meters, power boards, Wi-Fi, like your Wi-Fi router is another one that I always say everyone has to clear. And then any electricity wire lines, if those are, because this is the thing that people don't think about when it comes to like electronics, right? We might have a negative line, and that negative line might be pretty, safe if you're just looking at that negative line in nature, right? We've got a negative line in nature and there's nothing around it. It's just completely green, trees, everything's just nature. Then you stick a house on top of it and you've got your power board on that negative line. So now you've doubled up the negativity, right? Then you've got your phone that has Wi-Fi that's connected into the electric board that's right near that power board that's next to your bed. And now you've got the power board, the electricity line, and you've got the phone Wi-Fi, and you've got the power plug. So that's 4. Then you get a electricity antenna that's going from your home over that electricity line. So now you've got the line of electricity that's connecting into the main power over the top of the actual line. So you've got 5 levels of it, right? And that's all right next to your head. And I, no joke, have had to clear a person's house that had exactly that. And she had throat cancer.
Wow.
Didn't smoke, ate all of her vegetables organic, was the cleanest person in the world. And they were literally like, there is no way in hell that you could have throat cancer. It was because of those things being pumped into her body.
Is she okay now? Like, was there remedies made through the technology?
I cleared her house. I cleared the area, and when I showed her what it was, she was just too scared to sleep in there. Even though I cleared it, she was just like, I'm just going to sleep in another room.
Yeah.
Because obviously the trauma of having cancer is hard enough, and then knowing that that's the reason why she was so sick. And even when I was clearing it, it blew my mind. I was just like, people have no idea that this is the stuff that they're probably dealing with. And these things can be changed, they can be corrected, but unfortunately you only find out once you've got the cancer.
Yeah, wow.
So if we could shift that and start saying to people, maybe, you just get your power boards and all of those things that I was saying cleared, right? And all of your power plugs can be corrected. Super easy. Costs you maybe a couple of $100 and maybe some person's time to do it. Then that's one thing that, is an easy fix.
Yeah.
And you're already making your energy of your home more hygienic for yourself and your children.
Yeah.
Right? Because your children are absorbing this as well.
Yeah.
And then that's like what I am already working on, is like ways to start creating this information to people, because people don't know what they don't know, right?
Yeah.
Then the thing that I'm also working on is creating community land where we do biogeometry on it, because there is so much density in the cities that's toxic that right now they need places where they can detox from it. So they need to go to a place where they can go in and be completely clear from it. And if these power spots have the ability to connect into the centering vibration, they also have the ability to clear and heal and, allow us to, get rid of all of those toxins at a really fast rate so that we can heal.
Yeah.
And so the community land that I'm working on is like being a I want to say a healing community because it doesn't just resonate with everybody. But when I say healing, you know, people that are in interested in low tox living, you know, organic sustainability, permaculturists, all of those people are conscious, right? But the biogeometry brings it all together. Because once you put biogeometry into your buildings, when you put it into your machinery, when you put it into your technology, it completely changes everything. You're literally dealing with like such superfood power that if we were to start an apothecary and we grew mint on there, it wouldn't just be mint, it would be super mint.
Yeah.
Right? And mint already has the ability to calm and, you know, if you have an upset stomach, it's the energy of the green in the mint that is actually cooling, right? So this is talking about the information of green.
Yeah.
And this is what biogeometry does. It talks about the information because everything's information. Green is a cooling energy. And when you work with green, it's like the opposite of red. So you use it for anything that's a heat base.
Yeah.
So when you're dealing with upset stomachs, there's too much acidity, which is a heat. So you use the mint. But if we had biogeometry mint, it wouldn't just like soothe your stomach. It would harmonize whatever is in your stomach. And so that's the stuff I'm actually working with, is actually creating super medicine in a way. Like I was saying to you, I'm working with these ascended masters, and I've pulled out the information from these ascended masters to find which ascended master connects to a specific flower, to a specific essential oil, to a specific crystal, to a specific shape, to a specific color, and then putting those all together into a spray that connects into that being to create an energy that shifts in your body to harmonize with that ascended master's energy.
Yeah. So what are these devices that you would say install in a home? Because I've seen the simplest thing of just a tiny little sticker with a, you know, some sort of pattern on it put on a window. And is there other technologies, or is it all sort of based around that sort of just little shapes and stuff?
So Ibrahim's created the specific stickers that they use, and those are the ones that they use for correcting. But if you're like somebody that's creative, for me, I've made some stickers that are connecting in with the shape information of a plant. So this is a cactus.
Yep.
And there are fractals, and fractals, do you know about fractals? They're like the shape information of a fractal is, say, a circle that goes from a smaller circle, larger, larger, and you'll see that naturally in plants, right?
All the way up and all the way down.
Yeah, right? You'll see that, and that repetition of that particular shape, no matter how big or small it gets, is what creates the fractalized, because that is the movement of energy, right? So nature mimics fractalization in, say, cactuses or cabbage, right? Sunflower.
Shells.
100%,
Everywhere.
100%. Like a black hole, or, you know, specific things in space. And that's the macro of the micro, right? Yeah. So what I've done is I've found fractals, and cactus is one of them, for example, and the cactus has spikes on it. So if you think of something spiky, what does that kind of feel like? It's like, oh, the cactus is protecting itself. So the cactus in its shape information is a protector. Okay, so then what I've done is I've created the sticker with the cactus, and then I've done an overlay of a signature, and then now this I can put onto my clothes on the inside, for example, and I do this to my kids. I put a sticker on the back of their shirt that's on the inside, because they're right near a 5G tower when they go to their daycare, and that is enough information to stop the 5G subtle energy to contaminate the psychic gate of the back of their neck, which is where you're most sensitive. So the psychic gate is where a lot of entities
where they plug in
and
on the
stuff
Matrix
like
too.
Yeah. Oh, look, there's a lot of symbology in that stuff, right? That if we know about it, it's there.
Yeah.
But yeah, the psychic gate is where a lot of entities can enter, and like this is the thing you don't think about with all of these negative lines, with all of the amplification of these negative plugs putting into it. Where do you think negative entities live? Right? So if these negative entities need a home, they're going to go, that's going to be the best home for me to spend my time in, because that's the lowest vibration I can find.
Yeah.
And not only is that low vibration in these negative lines that are being amplified. So say a negative line like might start that big, then you put the smart meter on top, the Wi-Fi, then you've got the electricity plugs, then you've got the thing, and so now that line that started off like this is like that fat.
It's like
And
a doorway,
then,
right?
100%. And then that doorway next door is just as fat. And then they've got all their Wi-Fi in all of their homes that's then feeding into it. You've just got this festival of negative energy all around in the city that's just playing with each other, that's sending all of these forces that we can't see, but they exist. And so you wonder why there's a higher rate of, mental instability. I've gone back into healing work, and I've just been doing entity clearing work because there is just so much density in people's body that they can't assimilate. And it's just a breeding ground for these entities to, live. And it doesn't look like, a possession. It looks like, depression. It looks like a malfunction of, losing the will to live, or, not being able to absorb your food, autoimmune system disorders, or, losing your libido. Like, this is what entities do, is they take away the vitality, and it shows up like that in our body.
Incredible. So with ley lines,
Yeah.
on a property, so what type of work would you do to correct land? Like, can you find a ley line with the technology that you're using?
Yeah.
Because I'm super fascinated about this. I've got some land out in the Hunter Valley, and I would love to implement this technology, but I don't know how. So I'm looking at you. I would love to get you out there on the property to come and work your magic. And I remember you mentioning that you did some work on some land and some amazing, like two beehives or something.
Yeah, some
right
natural
next
beehives just started, appearing. And I think that's the magic of this kind of work, is it has the ability to reverse the effects of damage that we've created. So this is kind of why biogeometry is so important at this time, is that we've got, like I said, such high levels of contamination, and the biogeometry has the ability to not only absorb that negativity, but it can also turn it into positive energy. So if I was to do somebody's land, for example, that's a large mass area, you would start with just doing the main areas. So it might be your home, it might be a veggie garden, it might be where you keep your bees. And then once you've got those 3 areas done, then you start doing the outskirts of those areas, because once you create your home, you're basically turning your home into a power spot. It'll like be a high resonance of this centering vibration, and then you've got these other areas, and then you connect them in, basically. Then once you've connected those areas, you might be like, oh, okay, there's this shrub area over here, I'm going to clear that area next, and then it would be connecting it into that, because the biggest thing is the time. You need the time to find all of these lines, and then you need to correct them. And every time I connect into a negative vibration, I'm going into resonance with it. So it's a tedious thing of like...
So it takes from you as well.
It does if you're not careful. So I've learned now the hard way that you don't do too much negative energy. It's like you sandwich it. You know, you do positive, 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 a little bit of negative, positive, 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 a bit of negative. So you're amplifying the positivity, and then you're clearing the negativity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So would Feng Shui...
Different. Totally different. Feng Shui is using information as well, but different principles, not like the biogeometry. So like Feng Shui is understanding the directions of vitality. So like I was saying, the cave has the opening that goes to the center of that end of the cave, which is the propulsion. Every time you have a doorway, and biogeometry does talk about this, every doorway is a propulsion of energy. Every time you walk through a door, you're sending your energy through it, which is creating a push. So that's why the Jewish community have that little wadjul at the front of their door, because that particular angle that they put the little I can't remember what it's called, creates an energy.
Yeah.
And so every time they're walking through, they're sending that energy through the door. And biogeometry uses those same principles, similar to feng shui. Feng shui will go, okay, the doorway is a gateway of push. What's it pushing into? If there's a wall, then there's a angle. So every single right angle point, yeah, so a corner of a wall is a negative, like that angle is cutting into the energy of the room.
Yeah.
Right? And that's similar to biogeometry as well. Like we can correct that, but that's not our main motive.
Yeah.
We actually just change the vibration of the walls. So we'll change the energy of the walls frequency, and then we might correct some of the power plugs.
Yeah.
Then we'll change the energy of the doorway for whenever you're pushing through, what is it pushing in, and then we might change the Wi-Fi, and then we go into all of the furniture. We'll change the energy of the furniture, and then we might look at the ley lines in the actual room, around the periphery of the room, and then we block those off. And then we'll go, okay, what can we amplify? And that could be anything, basically.
Don't know why one of these cameras keeps turning off. Yeah, so I'd love to find a well on the property if there's water underground. Is that something you're able to pinpoint?
Yeah, so with biogeometry, you don't even have to go to the physical farm. If you get a photo of the land, we can potentially look for a well.
So like an aerial view, you mean?
Yeah,
Or?
just like an aerial view of the land. We can have a look at it and see if there's a way. And this is the thing, the tools can find ways that mimic the same energy. So if I was to get a picture of a well and then pick up the energy of that well, I can go over the map and see if anything picks up the same vibration of that well on your map.
Wow.
Yeah. That's how easy it is. Right.
That's insane, yeah. It's interesting, I got so much cactus out on the farm too, that it's, like you were saying, with the green and the coolingness of it. And it's also, if you think about a cactus, it holds water. Like it's very hydrating. It's a very hydrating plant. So if someone was dehydrated and you needed to hydrate them, could you use this technology to enhance the absorption of like water in a plant? Like say a cucumber, very watery. Like could you use biogeometry on that vegetable so then that water becomes more absorbing for your body when you uptake it?
Yeah. Did you want to close that door? I don't know the background sound. Oh,
Right.
That's all right.
I'll shut it anyway. You can continue.
So, one of the studies that they did when they were doing biogeometry is they got sweet potatoes, and they did a study where they fed one of the sweet potatoes water, and they were studying how it was growing. Then they fed another sweet potato water, salt water, right? Like Dead Sea salt water. So it's like the most densest salt water that you could get. Then they biogeometrized the salt water and then fed it to another sweet potato. So you had the first sweet potato being grown with normal water, the second one with Dead Sea with salt water, and then the third one with the salt water that was biogeometrized. First one grew, second one totally didn't grow. This third one crystallized in its structure when it was growing.
What?
Yeah. So not only did it grow, but it was like amplified in its structure by the biogeometry that was being fed from the salt water.
Wow. That is absolutely incredible.
So not only would you be able to create hydration in the cucumbers, you would be able to create super hydration.
Yeah. Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. So I remember hearing on the podcast that you did with Dr. Gilbert, talking about another woman's relative that was sick in hospital. And like he was in a coma, I think it was. And
Yeah, he was on his deathbed.
Yeah, do you want to share that story?
Yeah, it was crazy. Like, literally, she got a call from her friend saying her dad was passing away. There was nothing the doctors could do. They couldn't figure out what it was. And she said, look, I've just studied biogeometry. I don't know if it will help, but let me just, like, do the signatures to correct it. And so the woman's like, yeah, sure, no worries. She put him into one of the grids that you get when you learn the course, and like they can't say anything medical's going to happen, obviously, but she found the corrections, and overnight he recovered.
Yeah.
So literally, like the difference between illness is it depends on what type of illness. There's superficial, and superficial can be like contamination from psychic attacks. So that could be energetic contamination. So that's when we go into protection. There could be, and that's like entity stuff, right? That we don't even realize. And then there's that's the superficial, and then the physicalized energy is like really poor health habits and building a cancer from something that you're doing repetitively. So sometimes people fall ill and it's nothing that they've done to physically create it. It's actually happened from an energetic perspective.
Right.
And that energetics is something that when you correct it, it disappears, and that's when you get miraculous healing.
Yeah. And it's funny when that's actually a term that the medical doctors would use is spontaneous remission. When what that is it's a fucking miracle, right?
It's they have no idea what the hell just happened.
Yeah.
They can't explain it. It happens a lot, but well, I wouldn't say a lot, but I had a client who was stage 4 cancer, like what was it? Cancer in her uterus, and she was like only in her late 20s, so she was going to basically have the whole thing taken out. She came to me, and when we did a clearing on her, it turned out that there was this one time where she remembered having this weird dream. She couldn't remember why, but this dream came up, and she just remembered that something bit her. And then when we went back to that dream, it turned out that there was this entity that came through her energetics through her dream. And when it bit her, it contaminated her. And when we pulled it out and then she went to have her operation, the cancer was gone.
Wow. And how far between the operation and the biogeometry treatment?
No, this was just an entity removal. So this wasn't even biogeometry. But that's that's an example of like when you're dealing with superficial energy and how you can have miraculous healing, because what was contaminating her wasn't actually a cancer that she created. It was something that energetically, and this is why we had shamans, right? This is why we had these people that had the ability to clear that stuff, because there's a reason why we have medical practitioners and science practitioners and shamans. So she literally had a session with me and then had the operation the next week, and it was gone. Like it happened instantaneously.
Yeah, I've got another friend that does sort of entity removals, and she uses some sort of like pendulum thing, and she was telling me this crazy story of that she was doing this work and like the pendulum actually started dripping like black, like goo. And she said her soul told her, do not touch this stuff, go and put it out in the garden, wash the pendulum and everything. So there's wild stories when it comes to this sort of stuff. But touching on the pendulums, and the artifacts of Egypt, and Egyptian Scientology talks of these pendulums just being a ritualistic object. But there's that, and that's where they draw the full stop on that. Let's talk a little bit about pendulums and working with the pendulum.
When they were talking about, say doing brain surgery, they didn't think that they were capable of doing brain surgery, but they had the ability to do those types of procedures back then because they were using the pendulums to navigate. And when I say navigate, similar to like what I was saying to you before, when I am looking for something, I put the pendulum into resonance with what I'm looking for, and that could be beneficial or detrimental. So something that's a well is beneficial or a Cancer is detrimental. I could put the pendulum into resonance with a Cancer to find it, and then they would use that in the scanning of where they were going to work on that person's brain to find exactly the pinpoint of where the diseased energy is to clear it. So that's the same principle with the pendulum, is it depending on the intention, depending on how you're using it, you can use this as a way to create lots of different effects. And so French radiesthesia is a perfect example of that. French radiesthesia was a form of medical practicing back in France, where they would use your witness, which is a photo. A witness can be saliva, your hair, a picture of yourself, because that information is connected to you. So that information, if it's connected to you, if the pendulum can pick you up, it can find out what's going on.
Yeah, right.
So that's how the pendulum works.
Crazy.
Yeah.
We should I want to book in a session or something. Spend a whole weekend so do you do this sort of stuff at your retreats as well, like, or is it sort of more one-on-one deep sort of work?
It varies. I kind of change it up a little bit every time. I've done like flower essence workshops where I get the pendulum out and I teach people how to pick up what flower essence they need.
Yeah.
Pendulum skills is something that anyone can learn, but it's really the practice that makes you, work out how to do things. And once you do pick up the pendulum and how to do it, you can pick up, what your intolerances are, what vitamins you should take that are good for you, like not just taking all of them.
Yeah.
If you've got food in the fridge and you're not sure if it's gone off, you can test it with the pendulum, and then your body will say, don't eat that. So the pendulum has a lot of ways to use it, and that's what I like to teach people, how to use it.
So it's sort of like connecting to soul, but you're using a device, right?
You're connecting to your frequency.
Yeah.
So every person's like a different frequency, kind of like a guitar string. Everyone's got like their own sound.
Yeah.
And that sound is like the length of the string.
Yeah.
And that string length is what we're picking up when we're finding how long the pendulum is for you.
Right.
Yeah.
Amazing. Is there anything else you wanted to share for the podcast listeners?
I guess for me, yeah.
Actually, I would love to. So I mentioned to you about orgonite crystals are really blowing up in the wellness space. I've always had a funny feeling about them. They look real sexy, but yet to see someone explain how they work properly. I've seen people put them on top of like water and then freeze the water, and then the water becomes sort of like a shape, and that's as far as I've seen it in some sort of work, but I'd have to do that myself to understand it and believe it.
Yes.
So yeah, what's your take on the orgonite crystals and just crystals in general about holding energy? And
yeah, so like look, every orgonite's going to be different because they use them sometimes in a Merkaba, a pyramid, a sphere, so that they're all going to hold different shape information. The actual technique of the clear quartz being spiraled with the coil, right, is to amplify that. And then they've got the particular metal shards and stuff with the crystals. Now, the problem is they might work and start absorbing this negative energy, but the problem with them is that once they've hit a capacity, where does that energy go?
Right.
So they might start off working and people going, I'm getting all these benefits, and then all of a sudden they just go back into that old vibration. They've forgotten about it, don't think anything of it, and that orgonite stopped working, and instead of it clearing, it's absorbed the Wi-Fi energy into its matrix, and now it's holding it, and now you've got a double layer.
Yeah. And can you clear that energy out?
You can, but the ways of clearing it is going to be a lot more harder than, say, clearing a crystal, because it's usually in a plastic resin, right? So you wouldn't just be able to wash it.
Yeah.
You'd actually have to clear it energetically, and people don't think about energetics in a way of like, I'm going to clear it energetically, right?
Yeah. So just before you share whatever you're about to share, we didn't touch on negative green.
Yeah, vertical negative green.
And BG3, is it?
BG3 is the centering vibration.
Okay, yeah, cool.
Yeah, so vertical negative green is the They would say it's the detrimental energy, but not everything is detrimental in the vertical negative green. So everything is like when we're using the tools, which are pendulums, specific to which one you're looking for, whether it's beneficial or detrimental, the vertical negative green is the one that connects into diseased energy the most, right? So we're talking about the Wi-Fi's, we're talking about cancers, we're talking about poisonous frogs that can kill you, spiders, all that stuff. So the vertical negative green is the one that connects into that frequency. Okay, so we use that to pick up whenever there's something detrimental. Sometimes we can see it, sometimes we can't. We can find the quality depending on what like where we put the tool. So if we wanted to find radiation, we could find radiation. If we wanted to find Wi-Fi, we could find Wi-Fi, depending on where we put the tool, right? Yeah. But anything that's negative green is just like bad for you. And actually, the teachings of biogeometry have changed a lot, where they don't want people to do testings on on the negative green because it's so detrimental that people weren't doing the practice properly. And if you the person that found vertical negative green was studying it so much that he died, and when he did die, they found him in a mummified state, which is basically he had all of the the moisture, life force sucked out of him, that he just became like this mummified, shriveled up dude. Which is that's the power of vertical negative green. Yeah. So vertical negative green is how we find all the power lines and stuff. And then the BG3, which is the harmonics of the BG, well, there's more than 3 colors, but when Dr. Ibrahim Kareem started off, he found that the gold, violet, and green were the ones that connected all together to find the centering vibration. Since then, he's found more in his studies, but that's what created the BG3. Yeah. And so when you have those 3 frequencies, that's when you find the centering vibration, and that's when you find the power energy spots. And so there's small power spots because vitality has to be available everywhere, but they might be the size of a 5-cent coin, and they might be scattered everywhere around, everywhere, right? But it's when you get the big fat ones, like I'm not talking like even a meter, I'm talking about like a kilometer, that's when you've found like a proper power spot. Yeah, okay. So that's the difference. Okay, cool. Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to share on biogeometry or the work you do? Yeah, it's funny, I've just been, I was watching the David Attenborough Our Planet, and he was talking about his time and as working on this planet and the trajectory of what we're dealing with. And not just us, we have children, this is what our children are going to be dealing with. And, I knew from when I watched Al Gore's film, The Inconvenient Truth. Have you ever heard of that? Yeah. So I was a, teenager back then in school. And when I watched that, my heart just sank. It was just far out, dude. This is the world that I have to live in, knowing that this is what we're dealing with. And it's there's just so much disempowerment around the individual trying to fix these problems, right? And so I think the journey towards finding biogeometry was one that kind of led from, finding sustainable practices like earthships, where I was like, well, if we can make our homes out of garbage and they create a state that connects into the same forces of nature of with the homes that you create, you can make them so that they connect into the earth, and it creates the same biodynamic, whatever of the planet, right? Yeah. So I was like, okay, well, if we can do that with our homes, what else is possible? And so that kind of led me into understanding that biogeometry wasn't just about saving, the technology that the old Atlanteans used. It was actually about bringing back this technology that was going to save humanity, right? Because the shit show that we're left with is basically so far gone that it's not going to happen from a high political place. All of the high up billionaires have got their whatever security plan, and it's just literally we're going to be fending for ourselves, right? And so you think about living on land, and you think if you've got this beautiful oasis and things go sideways, you're basically going to be at the mercy of humanity and whatever they're going to be going through, right? And so from a very early phase in my life, I was like, there's got to be a way to change this. And so finding community land was one thing, but what I realized with a lot of community land is that they're still dealing with the matrix that's created that in the first place.
Yeah.
And so you look at nature, and if you're not working from a place where you're working together for the same common goals, you basically end up fighting for everything.
Yeah, because there's no coherence.
There's no coherence. Yeah. And so it always comes back to you're only ever going to survive if the people around you are in a resonance with what you're doing and they're working for a higher purpose, right? Because then it's got nothing to do with you. You're no longer the I, you're working for the greater good. And so when I found biogeometry, it really ignited this spark of this, we have this power to work together to not stop using 5G, to not stop using Wi-Fi, to not stop doing things that we find as a luxury, right? But what we can do is we can shift things so that we can start correcting the things that are killing our planet and start working together to actually create health, vitality, harmony, the essence of nature in our home. And we don't even have to move out of the city.
Yeah.
Right? But the thing is, nobody knows about it, and we're so bogged down by the 9-to-5 grind. We've got to make money to pay for the food, the electricity, and that's how they get us down.
Yeah, why would I worry about my neighbour when I got all this shit I got to deal with? Yeah.
100%. Yeah. It's like all by design, right? And so what I found is that, the more I started talking about this, the more people went, oh, wow. So like all I'd have to do is start changing my home. And it's like, yeah, and if you change your home, you're going to have a little bit more energy to actually give a damn about your neighbour and talk to them about how much better that you feel. And then they get their house done. And then if their house gets done and then they talk to mum and dad gets their house done, then they can start feeling better. And then all of a sudden it's like this ripple effect, right, in the pond. And so I find there's this passion of mine of like sharing this information, because the more that people are actually feeling it, and it doesn't cost thousands and thousands of dollars, to do a couple of corrections, but it does give you a little bit more of an edge on life because you start feeling better, right? And if you start getting your friends and your family members to start doing it, the more people that are doing it, we have an opportunity to change, right? And the beautiful thing that I did is, like, as soon as I studied biogeometry, I just got as many of my students that were interested in it to book in, and I just started getting them to like get on the field and do it.
Yeah.
And I was like, we need a big team, because there is a lot of people that need, help out there.
It's a all hands on deck situation.
All hands on deck. And so I think what I'm really passionate about is not just educating people, but finding a way to crowdfund. Like if someone can't afford $300 for all the modules to get it all done, let's crowdfund it so we just get everyone's places done, because the more people that are getting it done, the better it is for the bees, for the trees, for our plants, for our bodies, our kids. And I think that's something that is bigger than us. And that's the message that I want to really share, is that this is bigger than us, and there are answers and ways that we can do it. But it just comes down to people like us talking about it, making it available.
Yeah. You just pretty much summed up the are we all mentality, which is what I drill into on almost every episode, is how do you serve yourself and your family first, so then you can share it out with your community and then the world at large. We can't do it on our own, but when you start serving yourself and your family, it kind of, like you said, that ripple effect goes out, and that's where the impact does happen, and we can change the world. So where can people find you?
They can find me on Facebook, they can find me on Instagram. Happy to share my details in the links, and, have a conversation with people. There's like lots of ways that they can start bringing the beneficial energy in without getting their homes done. With the water, for example.
So I'll put I'll put your podcast with Dr. Robert
Yeah. Cool.
Gilbert in the show notes, and I'll link your Instagram and your socials and stuff on there as well.
Yeah, sweet.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much. This has been mind blowing. I'd love to have you on and go a little bit further. Maybe I can come. Maybe you can come and do some corrections, and then we'll talk about that as well.
Yeah, we can do corrections in your home podcast.
Yeah. And just for the listeners, anyone on YouTube, apologies about my camera. I'm not sure what was going on there. Kept cutting out, but I'm glad the camera stayed on for the guests. So all is well. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
I'll speak to you next time.
Cheers.